Atheists sometimes say that Christianity is nothing but a psychological crutch. You know, a sweet illusion to comfort people, but an illusion nevertheless. Well, too bad that this not so sophisticated soundbite ends up firing back at atheists, as we're about to see. The argument originated with none other than the famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who wrote that we tell ourselves that it would be very nice if there was a God who created the world, and if there were a moral order in the universe and an afterlife. But it is the very striking fact that all this is exactly as we are bound to wish it to be. In other words, Freud thought that since the notion of a loving God and of purpose reflect what we long for, we should be skeptical of their existence. And ever since, overexcited internet atheists have been rehearsing Freud's profound wisdom in YouTube comment sections. But wait a minute, what's the logic behind the claim that the existence of something we desire is questionable? Well, there's none. No, seriously, there isn't a logical link that gets you from desiring something to its inexistence. In fact, the exact opposite seems to be the case. I mean, have you ever felt the desire for an amazing culinary experience? Well, guess what? Insanely delicious food and amazing cuisines do exist. Or have you ever felt the longing for authentic friendship and true love? Guess what? Such relationships are actually real. So, sensing a desire offers, at the very least, a solid reason to look for the thing that satisfies that desire. It doesn't in any way constitute evidence against that thing's existence. But that's not even half of it. If people only believe in God because they want him to be real, even though he isn't, as the atheist tries to enlighten us, couldn't it also be that the reverse is true? Namely, that atheists don't believe in God because they don't want him to be real, even though he is. It sure seems so, because we're simply returning the favor and apply to the atheist the very reasoning he or she has offered us. And you know what's funny? It's atheist thinkers themselves who are kind enough to affirm that reverse case scenario. Take Thomas Nagel, for example, who confessed, "It isn't just that I don't believe in God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that." This looks a lot like someone telling himself that it would be very nice if there was no God who created the world. So, could it be that Freud's stroke of genius was actually meant to capture the spirit of atheism? But it gets even better. Given that atheists keep shouting from the rooftops that they only fancy views which are backed up by evidence, it's nothing but fair to ask, hey, what's the evidence for the claim that religion is nothing but a psychological crutch? Well, for starters, it's rather ironic that Freud himself admitted to another psychoanalyst at the time that the views expressed in my book form no part of analytic theory. They are my personal views. You remember? That's the book where Freud jotted down this cool stuff about religion simply being wishful thinking. Which means that there is not a shred of evidence for that idea, but that it's based on nothing but Freud's own wishful thinking instead. So if at this stage you're thinking that this crutch soundbite thrown around by atheists is itself a psychological crutch which atheists themselves are clinging to, you might be onto something. Still, we're not done yet. You know, I'm actually happy to admit that my Christian faith functions, at least in part, as a crutch. Yes, I'm weak, and yes, I'm in need of comfort at times. But so what? The reason why you come to believe a proposition has no bearing whatsoever on its truth or falsehood. For example, you may come to know that Richard Dawkins wrote his PhD thesis on domestic chickens because you love chicken nuggets, because it was revealed to you in a dream, or because you've been stalking Richard. No matter how or why you came to believe that good old Dawkins studied chicks, none of that bears on the fact that Richard is an expert on the thing that makes for a good chicken burger. So, even if it were the case that Christians believe in Christianity out of a need for a crutch, that's okay. The truth of Christianity still stands. But the weirdest thing about the atheist's crutch accusation is the fact that Christianity includes key doctrines that aren't exactly comforting. I mean, last time I checked, loving one's enemies was anything but a breeze. And the idea of worshipping a God who got himself crucified isn't the kind of thing feel-good therapists would recommend either. So I don't really know what Karl was smoking when he came up with the idea that religion is the opium of the people, or what the authors of the Humanist Manifesto were thinking when they wrote that traditional religions offer solace to humans. Christianity teaches that there will actually be a final reckoning for all our actions, which means that you carry responsibility for everything you do or don't do. Compare that to atheism, which ultimately implies that you're a law unto yourself and that you won't be held accountable for any of your actions, no matter what you do. Add to that the fact that selfishness rather than selflessness is the human modus operandi. And it seems safe to say that it's actually atheism which offers consolation for all those who shy away from responsibility. Which is why it's been said that a true opium of the people is a belief in nothingness after death. The huge solace of thinking that for our betrayals, greed, cowardice, murders, we are not going to be judged. So, does faith in Christ offer hope? For sure it does. Is following him comparable to a trip on opium? Far from it. Does the Freudian myth of belief being a crutch render faith in God false? Not even in the ballpark. Instead, it seems that atheism is the actual drug. Now, does this show that atheism is wrong? Certainly not. To say so would be to use the same illogic atheists use for their crutch argument. But what it does show is that if there is anyone leaning on crutches, it seems to be the atheist, the crutch being their cringy crutch argument itself. If you like this video, check out the one over here where I dismantle a skeptic's favorite Bible contradiction, which isn't even a contradiction to begin with. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.